Welcome to Bipolar She. I'm your host, Janine Noel. Bipolar She is a storytelling podcast about living with mental illness. The content of the show may include stories of suicidal ideation and suicide. At the show's website, bipolarshe.com, I've listed ways to find support. If you ever need immediate help, please dial 988, a suicide and crisis lifeline. I believe in the healing power of writing and speaking about our darkest of days in raw detail. So let's go. Today I sit down with sisters Ava and Sarah. In an earlier episode, Ava shared what it was like to care for Sarah when she was suffering from bipolar disorder. Sarah had a remarkable experience with ECT, which put her illness into remission. And today, both Sarah and Ava are here together to get the word out on ECT and its potential benefits. It's wonderful to have you both here today. Welcome, Ava and Sarah. This is so great that we're able to do this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I'll start with you, Sarah. So how did it feel listening to this podcast?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It was hard. It's sort of like the feeling of opening a wound again a little bit. I know you talked a little bit about that we both happen to be physicians. And, as a physician, you're the one taking care of your patient and you're the one that's sort of observing. I think it's never been fully comfortable for me to accept being the patient, which is just part of life. We're all patients at some point, right? But I think for me, my mind has always been the thing I could rely on the most. And I think hearing the kind of the rawness of maybe how bad I looked and how disheveled I seemed and how not myself I was, and some of the events around going into Sierra Tucson were extremely painful. I mean, the most painful memories of my life. So a lot of it, I think I've worked through, but I don't frequently remind myself of those memories. It's too much. I've worked with my therapist a lot about that. And he sort of said, take the lesson and throw away the memory. It's like, you don't need to remember every moment of some of those events. It's not necessarily serving you. It was interesting, but very difficult. I couldn't listen to it at one sitting. It felt in a way healing at the same time.
Well, I think your story is really interesting because of this late diagnosis in your mid-40s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, as a little girl or growing up, if you ever felt different, like your moods might be different from others?
I think that I felt really happy most of the time. And that's sort of the way I am now. I think my baseline mood is generally pretty high. And the one thing I remember feeling is sort of lucky. I remember it very clearly. I remember knowing that I was meant to do what I thought were really important things. I mean, it could sound, maybe it was delusional. I'm not really sure. But I think I felt very confident that I was put on earth to do something important and that I was going to be given the resources. And there was a lot of energy around this for me. Like, I don't have a lot of negative memories of childhood with respect to my mood or feeling any kind of depressive type symptoms.
I know it was so interesting when Ava said, oh, she skipped a couple grades. And I went back to listen to the podcast and there weren't any specifics about that.
Mm-hmm.
So high school was just a few years for you?
So I had been attending a private school where we grew up in the South. And in that particular area, there wasn't a lot of money. At the end of my 8th grade year, the school that I'd been attending and loving and thriving at, unfortunately went bankrupt. And so the options were I could either go to the public high school or I could go to boarding school and so our dad is a professor, now retired, but at the time he was teaching college in the town where we grew up. I just felt like, well, I'm comfortable with the college campus because our dad taught there. And I don't know, I just felt like I was ready to kind of get on with what I wanted to do. And I definitely wanted to go to med school. And it was just seemed like a kind of a logical choice for me. I ended up bypassing 9th through 12th grade and, went to the college. I mean, it was the college in our hometown. When I rewind my life, I realized, oh, yeah, that's interesting that feeling of wanting to accomplish huge things, very much that hypomanic part of my nature that has, I think, always been part of me.
So do you remember the first time you started to feel hypomanic before you got your diagnosis?
I think I was telling Ava that I used to actually pray for hypomania. It was like a joke when I was married. I would have these periods where I would just be super productive. It's not like I really swing that much. I usually have pretty high energy, but there have definitely been episodes, usually that correspond with some goal, kind of goals. There's a behavior or a goal I'm trying to accomplish where I just can ramp it up. I don't need much sleep. Everything's easy. I feel great. I'd probably say I usually over the years have experienced that maybe twice a year for as long as a month at a time. And it varies. I mean, sometimes it's more subtle, but that's kind of just how I always have been. It didn't even occur to me that was abnormal, like it was weird.
So in your experience, did that hypomania ever feel uncomfortable or worrisome?
I think that it led me to do impulsive things at times. I could be very decisive in a way that would be shocking to other people, that could be damaging. For example, when I ended my first marriage, I chose to leave. I did it very abruptly, even though it had been building. There's just been multiple times in my life where I get this clarity and I can see, oh, this is exactly what I need to do. But I haven't always maybe realized what I'm going to leave in my wake. I just feel this sort of frenetic, this urge to do this thing that I need to do. So I've never done anything that I would say is dangerous. But in general, that hasn't been my pattern. I mean, I love to shop and I love to give gifts, but it was never to the point where, I never did drugs. I was never a big drinker. I, never did anything. I was never a gambler or had excessive sexual behaviors, but it was often more goal-oriented. Like, for example, I remember signing up for some online Stanford entrepreneurship class, and I finished it in like 2 weeks when it normally supposed to take 6 months. Just stuff like that, where I would, just set my mind to do something and I could just power through it.
But could you feel it when it was sort of winding down?
Not really. I have to say I didn't have a lot of awareness of it until I had the 2 depressive episodes. And then it was like, and as my psychiatrist has helped me realize, it's not the high, it's the low. The hypomania is almost like a wave I could ride forever. I mean, it's like intoxicating. You feel productive and happy and like a good person that's doing good in the world. Even though I knew conceptually it could have a downside, I had never had the depressive episode to really ever, to understand that, as a friend of mine who's bipolar said to me, being bipolar, it's like having wings, and either you can fly and you can, as long as you can figure out how to soar and stay balanced, you're great. It's just that you can also go too high and come crashing down. So it's sort of, how do you use the wings to keep you soaring and not, crashing?
I think you're kind of lucky, actually, with hypomania not becoming something more or dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't think there are many people that are able to do what you do, to find that place and soar.
I think I would agree. I mean, I hesitate to even say this, but I think that for me, there's been a lot of gifts that have come out of being bipolar, because I can't tease out what part of me is, bipolar and what part isn't. It's sort of all, I think, baked into the same cake. And I think it's made me take risks that mostly have been positive, but as I mentioned, sometimes decisions that were retrospectively impulsive. I think I've hurt people at times because my mind was working faster, or I was doing something that to me seemed very clear and obvious, but sort of didn't understand the impact it might have on, family members, it's not an excuse for bad behavior, but I think, I'm hyper-focused at times. My girls were teenagers during my 2 depressive episodes, and it was really hard for them, to see mom in that scenario and being ill and not knowing if I was going to get better. And, my sister's been and my brother-in-law have been incredibly supportive. And I'm so grateful for all of that support. I really couldn't have done it without you guys.
I'm so happy we could be there for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, but I think for me, conditions that affect our mind can be complex. It's been a journey of accepting that there's, something wrong with my mind, if that's how you want to think about it. But I've really come to terms with the fact that I'm not really sure. I don't think of it as so much of a negative now. I think of it as something that has to be managed. Maybe there's a aspect of denial that's part of my recovery. I think I realized in listening to the podcast that I'm a very visual person. So thinking about some of the visuals of that horrible urticarial rash I broke out into at Sierra, that literally makes me feel almost nauseous to remember it. So I've decided not to think about it. I've decided, you know what, I remember it, but I don't need to go back to that moment again. It's not healing for me. As another friend would have said to me, just take your foot off your neck. You don't have to live in pain all the time.
So I really do think your situation is rare. Most people, when they go into a hypomanic state, there's danger there. So I just want to make sure anybody listening knows that if you're entering that state, don't try and just soar. If you need help, get it. And so I think it's very unique for you to be able to do that.
I think for me, being able to accept my mind for its pros and its cons and not feeling defective has been a big part of my healing journey. And I try and do that with my patients and just remind them, look, if you have depression or any mental illness, it's okay. It's just your mind it's doing its best. And how do we heal and go on and remember it could happen again? And if it does, how do we deal with it then? And
you made some big decisions actually in terms of treatment.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. Was that difficult for you?
Which part?
To look at ECT?
Not at all. My depression was so severe at that time, and I tried so many different meds, and I just either felt that they weren't working, or I just felt like a zombie, or not like myself. And as you know, when you start a medication, it takes several weeks often to know if it's going to be a good fit. My sister was such a huge advocate for me, and had seen, as I think she mentioned to you on the prior episode, our dad gets so much better with ECT. So certainly is a good predictive indicator that hopefully I was going to have a good response as well. But having been in med school, it wasn't such a foreign concept. It wasn't like it seemed so scary. So I just remember thinking, at this point, yes, I'll try anything. I had tried TMS and all those meds, and I just felt impatient because I just didn't see myself getting better. And it just seemed like, again, my sister was such a huge advocate of mine.
And what did the procedure feel like for you?
So you're under general anesthesia, so you don't really have any memory of the actual procedure. You arrive at it's not fun and games. You arrive at, I've had it done at two different centers. The center closer to where I live is a little more, how would I say, it's a little more of a pleasant environment. You don't feel, it's not quite like a sterile hospital environment. It's sort of like an outpatient surgical suite. They start an IV. You're given a combination typically of a muscle relaxant. An example would be the drug succinylcholine, which is a pretty strong, and then some combination of a couple other drugs, anti-inflammatory and an anesthetic. And then they take your vitals and you sort of just drift off to sleep. They wheel you into this other room. And that's the part you pretty much don't remember anything after that. So you wake up with a glob of ultrasound jelly on your right temple and you feel a little dazed, and I remember your jaw hurts because typically you clamp down. It doesn't, when they apply the electrical shock through the electrode, you do have a controlled seizure, but your body doesn't really move. It's just basically because of the muscle relaxant. So you don't physically seize, but you do clamp your jaw down for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. Probably because of the distance to the electrode. So the first 3 sessions or something, I had a pretty gnarly jaw ache after. But yeah, you just feel kind of a little achy and sleepy. And I remember a little bit of immediate kind of what they call retrograde amnesia. A little, you don't remember maybe the first, like the half an hour before you went under. But that's really it. And then, yeah, it's but I mean, it's really not that big a deal as far as my experience of it was pretty gentle. I mean, it was like, in other words, you get there, you get to know the staff, because I did it 12 times in a month, and having my loving sister waiting for me and, with some soft food because your jaw hurts. I think my familiarity with the hospital environment maybe made it less scary, because I spent a fair amount of time over the years in hospitals. But yeah, in general, it's not a very dramatic experience because you're asleep.
And about at what time marker did you start feeling good?
I don't remember the specifics of it, but I'd say probably after maybe like 5 or 6 sessions, I think I started to feel almost like the lights were back on. See, I did it 3 months later, and then 6 months after that. I think I did it 3 times total, after the full induction. I was going to just keep doing it, but there's no protocol, just as a preventative thing, because I was like, God, I never want to go back to that horrible state. I was asking the ECT psychiatrist when I should come back, when I had come out of my last anesthesia. It was actually just a year ago this month. And he's like, look, I think I need it more than you do. So he's sort of like, don't just do it because you're afraid. He's like, if you start feeling depressed, you can always come back at that point, sort of like taking off the training wheels.
And were you able to be open with others at work?
Obviously, people that knew me and worked with me closely could tell I was depressed. It took a month of disability to get the ECT. But I didn't reveal my bipolar diagnosis until about 6 months ago. I was working about 70 hours a week. It was probably the most stressful time of my career. But I think that's when I just was like, there's no reason to hide it or be shameful about it. I don't want to put myself back on, in a scenario where I could ever have another depressive episode. And it just felt like the right thing to do. And and they were okay. I mean, it wasn't like it was fine. It was fine. But I felt proud that I said it. And I had a letter from my psychiatrist that basically said, I'm treating this patient for bipolar disorder, because it's a little challenge, it's a little tricky to admit that to your employer when you're an executive in a company. But I'm glad I did it. And ultimately, I think it was the right thing to do. And it gave me this feeling that if I ever feel like I'm really struggling, or heaven forbid, if I ever have any kind of recurrence of the depression, I feel like I've been upfront about my situation. And I think it was the right thing to do.
So then looking forward, what helps you?
I think the biggest thing is boundaries help me. I'm a very empathetic person, which has served me really well as a physician and hopefully as a human in general. Sometimes I think that I take things very seriously. If someone that I respect or love says something to me, I can sometimes overly internalize it, and it's not healthy. I think that my tendency previously would be to take in everyone's input and sort of, oh my God, I'm a bad person. Look at what I did to my parents. Look at my kids. They've gone through 2 divorces. But, I think what I've come to realize is some of that, not all, but some of that was, I think, setting boundaries at work. No, I can't keep working 70 or 80 hours a week. Having the psychiatric care that I have has been phenomenal. My boyfriend's been a huge support to me in the last year. He'll point out, you're just doing too much. You got to stop. Like, that's too much. So I think just having someone else that's looking out for you, and the healing that's happened between me and my younger daughter has also been hugely helpful, because I think that was the source of that set off a lot of the depression. That healing, working on that relationship, and the grace she's given me. Her middle name is Grace, so the grace she's given me has been very healing.
I'm just curious, after the ECT, do you still take medication?
I do. I take lithium and I take Ambien to sleep, because I think that that's something I've realized, if my sleep gets out of, because when my mind starts really going, I could just go on and on. And exercise, I've been trying to build more of that back in. Yeah. And I have the most incredible friends. And it was one of the gifts of my illness, of seeing how people will show up for you. And it's just been incredible. And, being able to show up for them in other scenarios, it's really beautiful to have a community like that. So, and I've had so much goodness. I couldn't have done it without my family. And my sister was, my biggest cheerleader. Really appreciate it. And what my brother-in-law did was also very, very loving and selfless. And so
we're so happy to see you in such a good place. I feel like I have my sister back.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm just really proud of you for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience, because I would imagine, if I think of myself, what it would be like to be you, this is not the easiest subject in the world to discuss.
Yeah.
And I'm just really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that one of the things I was telling you about before when we were talking about the podcast is I hope it also opens up our communication, so that we can speak. I mean, it was a little trippy to hear about some of this on a podcast, and that was really hard for me. So I hope that I provide you a safe place, and I know that sometimes we can hurt, even like I was saying, we can hurt people that we love. But I think for me, as long as it's delivered with compassion, I want to grow and I want to heal. I want you to know you can tell me directly. Because I also want to say how sorry I am that you went through what you went through. I mean, I know it had to have been really hard for you to see me suffering and not knowing if I was going to get better. And you had to deal with all the mess of my life at that time. And I'm so sorry. I really am sorry.
It's life. It's not like you wished to have this illness.
Yeah.
And that's what family is for. We step up and I'm going to start crying.
No.
You just have to be there for each other.
I know. I really appreciate it so much. I just am, it's like I'm sure you guys feel the same way. You never want to be a burden to anybody that you love. But I was so ill. I was so ill.
I know that you were, and I'm so grateful that you're better.
Yeah, me too. I really am. I really thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And like you said, you have beautiful, great, incredible friends and parents who love you, and I love you, and you're surrounded by so much love and support. And you're an amazing person, just listening to you now, talking to Janine. And I just think, like, wow, she's really something.
Oh, that means everything. Thank you. Oh, I'm very fortunate. So I think part of my journey of healing is how to help other people come out of the shadows, right? From depression or any mental illness or bipolar disorder, and to know that there are multiple treatments out there, including things like ECT, that are incredibly life-saving. And on the topic of ECT alone, I think it's incredibly underutilized as a resource. And I hope that the world sort of becomes maybe reacquainted with it again. It's got all the barbaric, associations with it. But if anything, I liken it to being like plugged into some sort of universal source of love. It's like the light turned back on. And it's just, as my ex-husband, who's a cardiologist, told me, we shock the heart when it doesn't work. And no one questions that. He's like, so just do it. Do it. He's like, you got to come back. It was the sweetest thing. And it meant so much to me because I have so much respect for him professionally and in many ways just as a human. And, just look at all those beautiful acts of grace and love that were given to me. And so I would just encourage anyone that's suffering to know that there are a million ways of, getting better, including things like TMS for depression and ECT. It's not for everyone, but, it's certainly changed my life and I feel like saved our dad's life. And I would say that for me, protecting my brain has become a huge part of my life. Almost like, you have a skincare regimen or whatever silly, all the different things that we do. But protecting my brain is something that I'm taking pretty seriously these days. And I think that's where I was talking about the boundaries or whatever that looks like, right? Whatever those things are. And I would just think about like for me, like my friends and family are sort of a protective circle around me and my brain. And I think of the lithium as like another little ring of like protection and, you know, all the things and the exercise and the journaling and time with my kids and, you know, all those things. So yeah, just I think what hopefully we can do with this amazing work that you're doing is to remind people that there's so much hope. I mean, I just remember being completely hopeless for the first and hopefully only time in my life in those really dark days, just thinking my brain's never going to come back. It's crazy that your mind can do that, you know, can just go off the rails. But so just to have hope and to talk to someone, you know, when things are really low. And yeah, I think those are some of the lessons that I've learned. And just I think the biggest thing is to give people grace. And so, yeah, I think that taking my foot off my own neck and realizing like, yeah, you know what, I'm not perfect. I really screwed up some stuff. But through grace and compassion of like my family and friends, I've been able to heal some of that and hopefully never do anything, you know, never have any of those hurtful behaviors again. I actually really don't feel like it's a disease anymore. It's just part of me. Being bipolar is part of who I am. You know, it is when it isn't going well, it's bad. It is a terrible disease. But I feel like it is part of who I am. It's part of my personality. It's part of what makes me zany and creative and a risk taker. And, you know, so that's been such a relief. Instead of, it's almost like I was trying to reject this part. And now I'm like, no, it's just, why reject it? It's just part of me, you know? So that's been a great feeling, in all honesty. I think it is sort of heartening to realize like sometimes you just maybe haven't found the right formula yet if you're not doing well. So many people my whole heart goes out to people that are struggling and maybe don't have the resources or, you know, don't know that there are other options. You know, life has for us good and bad. But I do feel strong knowing that if I ever, heaven forbid, get depressed again, I feel like the ECT was so effective and that's a very good predictor of future effectiveness. So it's such a good feeling to know that. It's almost like I feel like I have a safety net. And that has been also very exciting because it allows me to sort of not just sit in a shell, like, you know, not just to sort of hunker down. So it's like, okay, it's okay to try new things. It's okay to date again. It's okay to do all the things that you're afraid, you know, I went through a phase of almost wanting to protect myself from getting hurt. Often in today's world, it seems like it's the last resort thing. And I think that's what I'm hoping will change. With insurance, often you have to fail like a number of things before they would be willing to, because it involves, you know, general anesthesia and a procedure and an anesthesiologist and a psychiatrist. I mean, it's definitely not inexpensive. So no one's going to go straight to that as a first line therapy. Yeah, I think advocating for yourself, and if you aren't in this state that you can, then having someone that can help you, and just hopefully the awareness that this is an underutilized but an incredibly effective tool for at least some percentage of the population. And the statistics are pretty impressive. The response rate can be as high as about 80% remission, which is phenomenal, especially when you're feeling at your absolute worst. So I think hopefully it will kind of it'll come back around as being something that people don't just think of as a last resort.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I know it's been hard to go from hearing Ava talk about this. So, I mean, it's huge. It's brave. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
California's children are facing heartbreaking challenges with mental health issues. To address this, Being Well California is leading a campaign with the California Department of Education to create a California Mental Health Awareness License Plate. The student-designed plate will support youth mental health programs in the state. With an estimated project cost of $850,000, just 10 individuals, companies, or organizations could make this initiative a reality. And every donation plays a crucial role during this critical time. Visit beingwellca.org today to create a legacy for generations to come. Let's bring mental health into the light, even if just a traffic light.